Hi, I'm Mal, and this is Miniature Warriors. Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today's video sees us pushing on with the Longstreet campaign. We start a series of 3 battles, all focused around the Battle of Antietam. The first one, Skirmish in the East Woods, takes place on the evening of 16th of September 1862 as both armies have finished their approach marches and are just feeling each other out prior to the main engagement on the 17th. Anyway, I hope you enjoy.
Hooker's 1st Corps, supported by the 12th Corps, crossed the Antietam Creek and swing onto Lee's left flank. The 5th Corps, under Porter, occupies the Union center. 9th Corps approaches the lower Antietam Creek, and 6th Corps is still marching towards the battle. As both the Union 1st Corps approaches the field, and the sun starts to set, General Hood of Jackson's corps pushes Colonel Gray's brigade out and into the East Woods. In response, Hooker sends Davis's brigade, of his 3rd Division, into the woods to clear them. Our game sees these 2 brigades, contesting the East Woods as the light begins to fade. As we transfer to the tabletop battlefield, we see Gray's brigade moving forward into the East Woods. The rebel commander pushed the 33rd Virginia into the trees and massed the rest of his brigade to the south of the wood. On his right flank, he deployed Captain Norris's Georgia battery, covering the open ground on the right of his brigade. To the north, Colonel Davis deployed his 3 infantry regiments in line abreast, supported by the 1st New Jersey Battery. He held the 7th United States Cavalry Regiment, in reserve just north of the field. Attempting to seize the initial initiative, Gray pushes his cavalry out to skirmish on his right, whilst positioning the 1st Georgia centrally behind the 33rd Virginia. Further to the west, Gray's 3rd Regiment, the 34th Virginia, entered the Miller's cornfield. In response, Colonel Davis orders his 2 right-hand regiments, the 1st and 2nd New Jersey, forward towards the wood. Battery B, 1st New Jersey Artillery, commenced shelling the rebel cavalry as Davis's infantry surged towards the enemy-held woods to their front. The 7th U.S. Cavalry maneuvered covering the Federal right flank, hoping to hold back the approaching rebels moving through the cornfield. The rebels at this point chose to shift the 1st Georgia further to their left inside the woods. On the extreme Confederate right, the 1st Georgia Cavalry dismounted and formed a firing line, as the Yankee 1st District of Columbia Volunteer Battalion commenced advancing. Colonel Davis angled his assault on the center of the woods, with the 1st New Jersey pushing through the intervening cornfield which blocked the rebel line of sight. But as the Union line cleared the cornstalks, the rebels let loose a thunderous volley of musketry. The 1st held their position and took up the fight. At this point, the 2nd New Jersey also cleared the corn and took up a position on the left of the 1st. Captain Norris's rebel battery flailed the Yankees with canister, blasting gaps in the Union ranks. But the valiant Federals held their line. The fighting in the center now settled into a most desperate sequence of charge and countercharge, interrupted with pauses when sheets of flame rippled along the fronts of the opposing regiments. In a desperate charge by the 2nd New Jersey, the Federal regiment braved a hail of canister and stormed the rebel brigade's battery, silencing the battery and driving its surviving gunners towards the rear, a task they managed after losing a section of guns. With the Unionists starting to flank the rebel position, Colonel Gray ordered the 1st Georgia Cavalry to shift to their left and apply fire onto the flank of the 2nd New Jersey, in an attempt to take the pressure off of his center regiments. But before they could achieve this, the Federals crashed into the exposed flank of the 33rd Virginia, driving it rearward. In a now desperate tact, the commander of the 1st Georgia Cavalry mounted his regiment and charged the exposed rear of the 2nd New Jersey, breaking the rear companies of the Yankee unit. The rest of the regiment sought the shelter of the cornfield where they rallied. The price to be paid for this reckless charge was several volleys delivered into the Confederate cavalry's rear by the D.C. Battalion, who shot away scores of the rebel troopers. Meanwhile, at the other end of the field, the colonel of the 7th U.S. Cavalry had spied an opportunity, and with a single command, sent his regiment hurtling into the woods in the exposed flank of the 1st Georgia Infantry. In a swift fight the rebels were beaten and driven rearward, leaving many wounded behind. Having swept the Georgians from the field, the 7th U.S. Cavalry continued through the woods and into the Miller cornfield. In the fading evening light, the commander could make out the campfires of the Army of Northern Virginia directly to his front. In a final push the rebels drove through the woods, sending the 1st New Jersey back, clearing both the east woods and the northern cornfield. But to their right the D.C. battalion still held its ground and only retired well after dark. Davis's brigade had taken casualties mainly amongst the 2 New Jersey units. Colonel Davis did manage to convince his superiors to reinforce his brigade with a 2nd Cavalry Regiment and battery. Colonel Davis was not promoted. Colonel Gray's brigade had also been handled roughly, with both his infantry and battery suffering badly. General Jackson, Gray's corps commander, has seen fit to attach the 2nd Alabama Cavalry Battalion to bolster the force for the next day's action.
What a great game of Longstreet. The Confederates, who were dominant in the early part of the battle, were pushed back at one stage by Colonel Davis's cavalry, the 7th US Cavalry, who smashed onto the flank of the 1st Georgia, driving them all the way back through the woods, and he followed through into the Miller cornfield. But a late charge at the end of the day managed to steady the situation for the Confederates, and the Confederates will now, leading into our next battle in the Antietam series, be in control of the East Woods at the start or dawn of the 17th of September, the start of the next scenario. Anyway, a great game, a very competitive game, and both commanders were pushed to their limits. So the card play in Longstreet really made the game. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you again. Our ring came back in Kirsten swore, for we got no cotton at Grand Decor, and we'll all drink stone blind. Johnny, fill up the bowl. Now let us all give praise and thanks for Bales, for Bales. Now let us all give praise and thanks for Bales, says I. Now let us all give praise and thanks for the victory gained by General Banks, and we'll all drink